A lot of these questions seemed like, well, so-and-so called you ugly, so what do you say to that? They were designed to really pit these candidates up against each other, but not over, like, policy.
Yeah, and what was odd, actually, when it did get to policy, I mean, the insulting questions would have been kind of cute for 2 or 3, but not for 3 hours. And the little bit of policy I thought was, you know, really on the duller end of it. Things like Iran, for example, which in foreign policy terms, everybody's had time to get their talking points set on. Whereas if, say, it had been on the so-called refugee crisis from Syria, people haven't had time to get their talking points together on that, and there might have been a little bit of more genuine mix-up as instead of disputes about what somebody said about Carly Fiorina's face or Rand Paul's face, right. Fascinating as both of those faces are. So I think it was a bit of a disappointment, and if you go back to what people said about the last one, everything they said about the last one turned out to be not true. Trump was finished because he'd insulted women, and Marco Rubio had a great night and he fell from 6-3 in my state of New Hampshire, and John Kasich had given a brilliantly poised answer between his faith in God and being compassionate towards same-sex marriage. Right. And none of those things made any difference, and we should beware the conventional wisdom about Carly likewise after this debate.
Well, and one of the things that I've noticed, especially looking at some of the recent polling after this debate, is that I don't think that Donald Trump, who's been the front runner, I don't think he damaged himself last night. I do think that some of the other candidates perhaps pulled themselves up. I mean, Carly Fiorina, at least in initial polls, has gone up a couple of points. Ben Carson, I think, has remained the same. But everyone was saying that he was going to damage himself. His opening statement, Mark, I think was the calmest thing I've ever heard him say.
Right, right. And the thing about it, I think, is that if you compare it with, say, Marco Rubio, where he made a kind of lame water bottle joke about the drought in California, he cannot make his water bottle be the running joke until next November. Likewise, Scott Walker, who had a disastrous night, said we don't need another apprentice in the White House. That's some line that some guy who's on his staff paid for him to write, and he stayed up late the night before practicing it for an hour in front of the mirror. And that actually is why there's Trump and why there's Ben Carson, because these guys have said to hell with the rules, because the rules are stupid and they don't do anything for Republicans or conservatives.
How do you feel Jeb Bush did yesterday evening?
Well, I think he did better than Scott Walker, who I think had a disastrous night. But at the same time, you know, Jeb Bush isn't quick enough on his feet. He was comparatively high energy, but for example, when he called on Trump to apologize to his wife, you can't really do that unless you're actually prepared to go full out and either literally or metaphorically slug the guy in the kisser. You can't bring up your wife and defend the honor of your wife, and then when he says, "Nah, I'm not going to apologize to her," okay then. I think that's the problem with Bush. He's simply not nimble enough when he's up on that stage, whether it's with Hillary or it's with Trump.
And he has been, I mean, he's got the war chest. He has been for so long, since before everyone else, including Donald Trump, Carly Fiorina, everyone was throwing their hats officially into the ring. He's been crowned as the front runner. And maybe perhaps in past election cycles, he would be. Maybe he would have been the front runner. But this is a different, we're looking at a different map. This is a different election. The electorate's different.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that Trump figured out something very basic, that there are all these elaborate rules and conventions, but that underneath the system itself is weak. The guys who put their money on Jeb Bush thought that it was a Republican donors party, that the base complained for a little bit and they grumble, and like last time round, they'll go with a Rick Santorum or whoever for a caucus here and a primary there. But in the end, they'll fall into line and they'll go with the donor's choice. And Trump recognized that, in fact, it's like some gay 90s boulevardier from Paris strolling along the Champs-Élysées in 1893, and it looks perfectly healthy, but inside the guy is hollowed out with tertiary syphilis and about to keel over. And that's basically the Republican nominating process.